welcome to episode 205 of School Librarians United. I'm your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian, I knew I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself, my interview guests, and listeners who reach out to the podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast has something for you. Welcome to the final episode of 2022. What a year it has been. Starting on January 7th of 2022 and episode 155 all the way until today, this year would not have been possible without all the amazing guests who have shared their expertise and resources with us each week. And I will be taking a break from recording for several weeks and will return with new content beginning on January 6th, 2023. In the meanwhile, I invite you to consider listening to some of the many episodes which have been recorded over the years. I've included a link in the show notes to the playlist, which are organized thematically and also by age group. And with over 200 episodes, there's bound to be a few that interest you. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback and episode suggestions. You can reach me either on Facebook. On Twitter, my handle is @LMS_United, or the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I'll be sure to send you a podcast sticker. And now a word from our official sponsor, Capstone. Capstone is an innovative publisher and education technology provider of children's content for school libraries, classrooms, and at-home learning. Home of the award-winning PebbleGo research database, Capstone has a passion for creating inspired learning and intellectual curiosity in children, and I'm so excited to be working with them. And now in a segment I like to call Why I Love Capstone. Friends, while so many of us are being reminded that winter is here to stay for a while, it is awfully hopeful to see the spring 2023 preview, which Capstone has provided, and I've included a link in our show notes. And friends, the wonderful thing that Capstone has done is make it easy to get excited about these new titles, which are going to be released January 1st. And I will say a couple of these really stand out. I love this first one, Yoshi's Big Swim. And the wonderful thing is that Capstone has actually included an entire preview copy, which you can read the entire book in its entirety. I had to do that before I could finish reading this ad. But they also include a NetGalley link, a poster which is available, and coloring sheets. Scrolling down through some more of these titles, the wonderful thing again is that Capstone is going to include previews when they can, a NetGalley link, as well as activities which students can enjoy once you have the book. But again, it's really sort of a great way to get a sense of whether or not your students are going to enjoy these books. Another new title for 2023 is called Liam the Lion. And what makes this really unique and special is that the creators are Indigenous. It's a team. We've got Andrew Stark, who was raised on an Ojibwa Indian reservation in Michigan. And the illustrator is Emily Faith Johnson, and she is a member of the Sault Ste. Marie tribe of Chippewa Indians. Another new title for 2023, and I'm especially excited about this because I happen to know for a fact that there are listeners tuning in who live on the island of Guam, is a book called Deep, Deep Down, The Secret Underwater Poetry of the Mariana Trench. And this struck a chord with me because I've lived on Guam twice in my life, and I was acutely aware that we were extremely close to the deepest underwater trench in the world. And I loved reading this. They do provide a NetGalley copy as well as an educator's guide, a download poster, and download trading cards. Be sure to find these and all of the new titles that Capstone has coming out in 2023. The digital catalog is included on the website. I am so grateful to Capstone for their continued commitment to support the podcast in Season 5. They are offering listeners of School Librarians United a very special discount. Visit shop.capstonepub.com and use the code UNITED to get $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and Capstone interactive ebooks. That's code UNITED for $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and ebooks on shop.capstonepub.com. And now for our episode supporting rural librarians and my conversation with Heather Perkinson. Heather Perkinson, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really glad to be here.
Friends, Heather is our very first interview from Maine. I'm so excited to be able to bring your voice to this conversation, and I think listeners will realize very quickly why you are the perfect person to be speaking on how to support rural librarians. Would you first give us some context? Where in the country do you work? And tell us about your current program and the grades that you support.
So I'm a high school librarian in Cumberland and North Yarmouth, Maine. They are suburbs of Portland, so a little bit more urban than a lot of the state. Portland is really our most active, most urban city. And I have 9 through 12, about 600 students, and it's a very active library. It's a flexible schedule, so I'm just collaborating with teachers when I can, and having them come into the library. I don't have an assistant right now, so I can't get out of the library. And that I have had one in the past, but I don't right now. We have, I'm the advisor for our civil rights team, which is specific to Maine. The civil rights teams are tasked with raising awareness about equity, diversity, and inclusion in the schools. And they are overseen by the Maine Attorney General's office. So that's an issue that's very near and dear to my heart, and something I'm able to be active in with my students, and puts me in touch with students who are kind of quirky and very activist minded, and then I'm also the advisor for the sophomores, and I'm on the leadership team, which is huge and important. I work with the other department heads, even though I don't really have a department of my own, but I think that's, every teacher should be on their school leadership team, because you just get to hear so much about what's going on in the school, and get to be a part of those conversations.
Yeah, I was this week selected as a union representative for our building. We have several union representatives, and one of our claims to fame is we sort of have our finger on the pulse of the building, because we engage with our staff from all walks, and that is a wonderful opportunity to get a feel for what is truly happening in all the different areas that we support. And, I want to go back. You were talking about this civil rights team, and I'd like to know a little bit more, if you wouldn't mind, please. So this is a student organization, or are you also working with other educators?
It's a student organization. It's a team of kids. It's a club, and it is sort of sponsored and overseen by someone at the Maine Attorney General's office, and they organize some professional development for the advisors around the state. So a lot of schools have these teams, and so we work with the other advisors sometimes, and then they also sponsor some activities and events for the kids, which is great, because our kids love to be able to get together with kids from other schools. And in a rural state, there are not that many opportunities for that.
And especially in person. because in order to get together, the expectation is that everybody is going to be traveling a little bit. So could you give us an idea of the kinds of things that your students are interested in doing to bring their these issues to the forefront in your building?
So a big thing for us is like organizing an assembly with a guest speaker. One we did, which was really successful. We had a woman who is the head of an immigrant rights organization in Portland come and speak and talk about her experiences as an immigrant and the people that she works with. Sort of awareness activities and days. And then we also respond to any incidents of, unfortunate events. Like we've written letters of sympathy to groups that are impacted by a national event, or if there's an event in our school community, like a child is targeted for their race or their background, then we respond to that directly with some sort of activity. That would be another. We've organized guest speakers in response to those kinds of incidents.
Well, and I think that the important thing is that it becomes a priority, and now there's somebody in the school that's speaking directly to it. I know in districts where I've worked that having a DEI coordinator or DEI representative, somebody who spearheads those initiatives and addresses the issues when they come up, is usually somebody at central office, and the likelihood is they're not somebody that the students would even know, and oftentimes teachers don't know who this person is. It's just somebody in central office, and the fact is that you've taken this critical issue, which I think, and I know in our school, we have groups of students who are impacted on a regular basis. And I think that having a student-led organization to recognize this and convey those kinds of messages to their peers is really impactful. So I think that's great. Friends, I saw this question on Twitter, and I'm so glad. I actually already had this as a question for Heather before it showed up on Twitter recently. But, I'm always looking at our library websites for fun and inventive ways to support our school community. And I'd love, Heather, if you could share with listeners, students can request a pass to spend their study hall in the library. And that's exactly, so many school librarians are trying to find a solution that not only works well with the students, but also one that the administrators can support. And obviously communication is always key, and keeping track of where our students are at all times is our responsibility. So what solution have you come up with? And I'm grateful, friends, I put a link in the show notes, because Heather's, it's right there when the kids get on the library homepage. What solution have you found? And by the way, this is for a study hall, not lunch, correct?
Correct.
Okay,
yeah.
Because I know not everybody has a study hall configuration. So, but please share.
Right. So I love having kids in the library for their study hall, and I say, if you want to come in and browse for a book, or you have a quick question, you don't need to get a pass. Just come on in. But if you're going to spend your whole study hall in the library, and we have block schedules, so that's a long block of time, I want you to fill out a pass. And I'm happy to have kids from all the walks, right? And I make connections and build relationships with those kids. And then when I see them in classes, or when they do get forced to check out a book by their teacher, I've already built that relationship with them, and so things go a lot better. My athletic director uses the phrase "trust but verify."
I think that that's a very much needed approach to when it comes to our young adults who have decided that the agency we give them, they're going to run with it, and
exactly.
give them an inch, they're going to take a mile, and yes, trust but verify.
With teenagers, I think that's essential. What I have them do is fill out a very simple Google form. I have Google Forms set up for each period of the day, and we're on a double day schedule, so we have maroon days and white days, and So I have links for each of those 8 periods. Each of those periods have a form. And the form just asks their name, the date, their study hall teacher's name, and that's it. And it goes to a spreadsheet of responses. And then I have the list of kids who have signed up. Now, their study hall teachers also have that list. So there's the verify. And the administrators also can see that spreadsheet with the list. So I take attendance when they show up. So there's no like disappearing between study hall and the library. And if they decide to go, we have labs in the school, like an English lab and a math lab for extra help. So if they decide to leave the library and go somewhere else, I make a note of that on the spreadsheet. And then I just, I have tabs on that spreadsheet for the previous days. I keep track, like every 2 weeks, I start a new tab and I delete that day's attendance and put it in the tab. So I have like an archive. If an administrator says, can you show me where so-and-so was he really in the library on the 10th? Then I can just pull up the tab and there it is.
Play this out for me. How would this work for a student if they wanted to sign up for study hall with you? What would that day look like for them?
Okay, so Hermione has to get a pass to come to the library. In the morning, while she's having her hot cocoa, she opens up her computer and clicks on the link, fills out the form. Then she has to go to her study hall, second period, say, and check in with her study hall teacher. She says, I'm going to the library. Here's the confirmation email I got when I filled out that form. Okay, so if, for example, I have a class coming in and that period is not available, they wouldn't get the email because they couldn't fill out the form that period. So like I have to turn on the response part of that spreadsheet, of that Google form for each period every morning. And if it's not turned on, there's a little message that says, no passes this period, please stay in your study hall.
So the only opportunity they have is the morning of. It's not like somebody could schedule out a semester's worth of hall passes with you on the first day and just be done with it. It's a day-by-day basis. And I think that's important because I think for so many of us, well, for all of us, our days change and much of it is out of our control. And when teachers come down, it's very difficult to also be responsible for supervising students who are working on their own. And as you said, you don't have an assistant. And this is where you say, hey, if I did have an assistant, this problem would go away. And I love that you also have that opportunity because I know for so many of us, because our schedules are so varied from day to day, it does give the librarian ultimately the ability to not accept responses if students are interested in coming when you're not available. Maybe you're at a conference, right?
Right.
So I'm curious, you mentioned block scheduling. I know what block scheduling is, and some people do. Would you give listeners just a very sort of overview of because it really does affect the length of your class periods, which I think is really important.
Right. So we're on a 2-day schedule. Kids can take up to 8 classes, but they meet over 2 days. So 4 classes a day. The periods are about 78 minutes long, I think. And that's a lot of time, but you're not just standing and delivering the whole 78 minutes. You're breaking it up and it works. I love it because it means that a teacher can say, oh, one way I could break up this big block of time is to come to the library for half the period.
And I think that for those of us who do team up with teachers, it's so you don't want to cut in on the what is important to them, and yet what we bring to that lesson is so important. And sometimes I'm like, hey, do I have 15 minutes? Do I have half an hour?
Right.
How long do I have with your kids? And of course, 15 minutes isn't enough time to do anything. But I love the block scheduling is very fun because the kids have a chance to take 8 classes. I know where we struggle is right now, our students in high school can only take 6 classes, which really does limit the number of classes outside of the core group of curriculars that the students are required to take. And it does make it very hard, especially if students want to stay taking a language or playing an instrument or taking drama. A lot of electives fall by the wayside just because you can't
suffer.
Yeah, that you just can't support that kind of enrollment if you only offer 6 periods. But if you've got an 8-period class, that's huge. That's fantastic. Friends, I strongly encourage you take a look at Heather's homepage, and I'm guessing that if they want to get any more additional information, they could probably DM you on Twitter.
Yeah, or send me an email. I'm happy to go over the workflow. I really should write up a blog post or something and put that out there, because the workflow is a little like there's Hermione's workflow. And then there's my workflow with turning on the passes every morning and moving the responses to the archive every night.
Well, and thanks to like a Google form, you can add those other people in your school to take a look, and you've got administrators who can view at any time. You've got that transparency so that the teachers at any time can see what's going on. I know we're using a Google Sheet right now with our public library because we're circulating some of their books. And as the books get checked out and as they get checked back in, I'm keeping a Google Sheet that they monitor daily for changes. And it allows us to check out books on their behalf, but also have that accountability piece. And I think that they found that very reassuring, because at any time we can see which books are in and which ones are out. And so thanks Google for opening up those permissions. Friends, when it comes to supporting rural libraries, what does it mean to be rural? And I wanted to get a sense of comparison. So New York State's population, and this would be density, this would be people per square mile. New York State's population density is 432 people per mile. Michigan's is 178 people per mile. Maine is 43 people per square mile. And the winners of this game, Alaska and New Jersey. Alaska has 1 person per square mile, and New Jersey tops the national rankings here of density per square mile with 1,276 people per mile. When it comes to being rural, are you a lifelong Maine resident?
No, I grew up in Washington, D.C.
And were you ever a school librarian out there?
No, I haven't been in DC for many years, but
okay.
I've been in Colorado, I've been in Chicago, Boston, New York State, and Maine, where I live, is sort of Maine light. It's not that far from Portland, and Cumberland, where I teach, it's a bedroom community. There's like not really a town center with a lot of businesses, which brings up some challenges for kids. Like, kids have to travel to find a place to work, right? There are very few places within walking distance where they can have a paying job or even volunteer. It's because it's a bedroom community and there aren't very many businesses there. So in that sense, it's very rural, but it's an easy, 20-minute drive to Portland. So it's not as isolated as many of my colleagues' towns.
Can you give us how I don't even know how to describe that. Like, how would you describe some of your I don't know how to put words around how to describe how rural Maine is. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah.
I mean, there are parts of Maine where the towns don't even have town names. They just have numbers.
What? So communities that haven't, that sort of, they're not part of a township. Or
They're like
they're
not
not incorporated.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, are you sort of off the grid then? I'd be really curious. Are you supported? You have a tax base and,
somewhat.
Nope. And
Nope.
I guess the other concern is, all of a sudden schools become essential because if your communities are that rural, there's a possibility that the nearest public library might not be. So let's talk about access to books here, because if you are living in a state that is as rural as Maine is, not only are the schools vitally important because those become focal points for social gatherings, it's the community center in the absence of larger civic buildings and a larger sort of community neighborhood. But you're also probably removed from your public libraries as well because you don't have the tax base to support large public library networks around the state.
Yeah, so before I came to Cumberland, I was teaching in a school district only 20 minutes from Lewiston, which is another big city. And it was made up of 3 towns, and yet in none of those 3 towns was there a public library. So it was a complete library desert. No public library at all. And we were entirely dependent on the state library's books by mail program.
Okay, I wanted to make sure we talked about that. So forgive me, but do you get a sense in Maine that the schools have a fighting chance of supporting print collections because in many communities there isn't a large brick and mortar library network that they can go visit? I know in my community where I teach, our public library is 3 miles away, and that is decidedly close enough that we don't have to build a print collection because our kids can just go 3 miles down the road to get the books from the public library, which is a personal battle that I'm having to wage right now. But for you, do you sense that Maine librarians working in schools have the support they need to build a print collection because the public libraries are not as readily as accessible?
I mean, no, because we don't have the budgets that we would need to do that. We're not getting the funding from our towns to create a collection that serves adults and preschoolers and infants, right? So we don't have board books available. And that means that the kids that we get coming up to the school haven't had access to, the public library, what a public library provides to young preschool children and infants is so important and crucial to their development and their ability to learn how to behave in a class setting, how to sit and listen. All of those things happen because of public library programs. And we have kids that have never experienced a story time, never had their hands on a board book. We do have a program, I should mention, we do have a program that works with the pediatricians in Maine, and it's funded by some grant organizations, and they, whenever they go in for a well child visit, they get a book.
Oh, I love that idea. I think that's terrific. Yeah. Well,
it's called Raising Readers.
So you mentioned, and I rudely cut you off, you mentioned about the state lending books to the school districts. Can you give us a little more information about that program?
So Books by Mail, we have a vibrant and well-funded state library in Augusta, which is the most central city in the state. And you can borrow, it's essentially interlibrary loan, but it goes directly to the student's house. So you request the book and then it gets mailed to their house, comes in a pouch. And there have been some ups and downs on funding. I could not tell you, I should look this up. whether postage is currently paid or whether that's the responsibility of the student. Mm-hmm. The last time I was using it, when I was teaching 10 years ago in that rural district that had no public libraries, we got around the postage by sending them out from the school.
Oh, that's smart.
So the kids received them and then they returned them to me, and then I had the school mail them. So the postage was paid for by the school.
Well, and until that number of books gets unreasonable, I imagine that the school district might not even notice an extra piece of mail going out. I know that I used to teach a lesson using the book My Librarian is a Camel, and it's a great story about how libraries are serving remote areas, and mail is often used in parts of Canada and I know Alaska. That shipping books out by mail also, I think, is used in Australia. Because it makes more sense to be able to get the books directly to the students. You obviously have that access issue and that timing issue, not being able to just put the book in the kid's hand is that impediment. And so I know that's got to be a frustration, that delayed sense of gratification. The kids learn at an early age, because if you don't live close to a public library, all of a sudden you're waiting on the mail to deliver your library book. But I know that Maine is not alone in that solution.
No, and you get good about saying to the kid, so you want to read book 2 in this series? I'm going to order that, but I'm also going to order book 3 because I know you're going to want that one and you're not going to want to wait.
Well, and I think that it places a premium, and it demonstrates just how valuable the book is. And I think the kids must internalize this responsibility that they are taking care of something that belongs to a larger network of lending that goes out to all those students in Maine. Wow.
I always say to them, there's a very small number of librarians in this state, and we all know each other, and you don't want to embarrass me in front of the other librarians, so make sure you bring it back in one piece.
Well, and you mentioned the number of your membership. Friends, you are president of the Maine Association of School Librarians, is that correct?
Yes, Maine Association of School Libraries. Oh. We say that rather than librarians because we are not just librarians. Our state includes a large number of paraprofessionals who are running libraries. And, I have tremendous respect for these people. Some of them came into the position just because it was a job that worked with their schedule. And now they are, just as passionate about serving kids and defending the freedom to read and developing inclusive collections as any professionally certified librarian. And they're doing the job of a certified librarian, but they're being paid like $12 an hour in some cases, and no benefits or very limited benefits. And it's hourly and it's not salaried. And
I had a listener reach out to me 2 weeks ago and asked a very related question because they're a library, like a tech or a library para. Everybody has different names for them, but somebody who has not gone to library school, somebody who does not have a master's degree, and asking, how do they fit into this conversation with the podcast? And really, I sort of had to look long and hard at how the language that I use, how inclusive am I when I'm talking about the school library professionals who are working in our school libraries. My guest last week, Dr. Margaret K. Murga, used the word school library professionals as an inclusive term because there are so many people who find themselves working in the libraries. I want to just point this out because this is amazing. So the Maine Association of School Libraries puts that designation on the location rather than the person who occupies that space. And the burden then is not on how qualified the person is who works there or how many years of education they've received in a certified library school. but it refers to them as the people who are doing the work day in and day out of being in that library space. So you're sort of recognizing the library. I got to say, I know Michigan's not alone. I'm fairly certain that in order to belong to our state organization, you have to be on some path to becoming a credentialed librarian, whether you're getting a certificate, an 18 credit certificate, or you're getting that 36 credit, master's program. I know I talked to somebody in my state who said, "Oh, I used to go to your conferences, but I'm not a librarian, so I didn't feel comfortable being there." And I think because they're an ed tech specialist, a tech integration specialist with no library training, but by circumstances, as you said, many people find themselves working in the library, and not because they went to library school, but that's where life brought you to. And so I love that Maine recognizes that people who participate in the programming that we're hopefully going to talk about in a few minutes might not have necessarily all arrived there with their degree in hand or their certificate in hand, ready to be librarians.
Right. And all of those experiences and the work that they've done is so valuable and important that we don't want to discount it. And Maine is a tough state to get to be a certified librarian in. We don't have a graduate program. That is in-house in the state. So the closest we have is Plymouth State in New Hampshire. And it's tough. There's an undergraduate degree that you can get, but that doesn't meet the certificate requirement that the DOE requires. So it's not easy to become a certified librarian in Maine.
But I love the way that you have come to find, and this again, we're supporting our rural librarians, and by acknowledging that there are people who are occupying those spaces, and they are also welcome to be a part of your professional organization. Is that right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we try to keep our membership cost really low. It's only $25 a year. As a result, we have to be really creative about conferences and professional development because we don't have a lot of money. We don't have an endowment. We don't have a big base of money. We do reach out to other types of professionals like the tech integrationists and the English language arts people. We had an event this fall that we worked with them and the Maine Council of English Language Arts, MCELA. Yes, that's right.
It's like alphabet soup.
Right. They actually gave some money towards our speaker's fee for that. And then for the registration for that event, we gave any MCELA members the same rate that our members got. So we do creative things like that with professional development.
Well, and I'm glad you mentioned money, because I think when you are trying your best to reach and support rural librarians and library professionals, cost is always going to be an issue, because you're dealing with districts that may really not have the kind of money to provide those membership fees and those registration fees. And invariably, like a lot of librarians around the state and library professionals, we pay out of pocket.
Yeah.
It is
small schools, small budgets.
Small schools, small budget, and very few in between. And you want to bring that, all the more reason to want to lower the bar for entry, right? So I'm curious, where are you in your tenure as president of the Maine Association of School Libraries?
It's a 2-year job, and this is the middle of year 1.
Wonderful. Can you give us some ideas of what are some of your goals? What are some of the, looking ahead to, you have a year and a half ahead of you, what are some of the things that you're hoping to do to support the professionals who work in Maine's school libraries?
So a number of things. First of all, reaching more of the librarians who are in the far corners of our state and who don't feel included. And I say Augusta is thought of as the center of the state, but it's not. It's pretty far south. And if you live up in the county, as we call it, in Aroostook County, if you are considering coming to a conference in Augusta, that's like a 4-hour drive. So we have to be super creative about how we can offer professional development to those librarians who are in the far corners. And we have so much to offer each other that just developing ways for us to network with each other and get together with each other in regional groups, that's a big goal for me. The professional development event that we had this fall, we had a man named Lawrence Alexander come and speak about equity, diversity, and inclusion. And he spoke virtually from his home in Massachusetts. And we broadcast that to 8 different locations around the state. So we had regional watch parties, and we gave each of those host locations a little money towards refreshments. And then we had some discussion questions for them to address after the hour-long presentation that he gave.
But I think that's clever. And I think that it's working with the strengths that you have as an organization to bring together. These watch parties sound great because now instead of feeling like I'm going to turn on my Zoom camera and everybody's going to be in their own respective spaces, making that effort to bring 8 groups of people around the state to areas where they can congregate and they can socialize and network. And obviously it's done in a regional way. So the burden is not too high in terms of driving.
And you get to be in someone else's library. Like you get to be in someone else's library, right? Anytime we step into a colleague's library, we learn so much just being in that physical space.
Well, and having that opportunity, I feel like a tourist whenever I do. And I know that I have had that invitation and opportunity to take a professional day. My school will release me for a day to go. And I usually try and drive as far as I'm usually an hour away to see something that I can learn from and take a look at what they're doing differently than I am. And it really is a wonderful opportunity. But I love how you've use the watch parties and the webinar combination to sort of create both an in-person and a remote learning experience, but it still brings everybody together.
The technology part of it was nerve-wracking.
It always is.
Yeah, but it was like times 8.
Yes, and the fact is that instead of having 47 different people logging in, you might have, just 8. You have 8 people logging in. You sort of literally localized each of your tech issues. And I think that that's a neat solution. But can I ask you, were you using some of these solutions before the pandemic, or did they come up as a result of the pandemic?
The only thing that we were already doing when the pandemic happened was we were having our board meetings, our MASL board meetings by Zoom. So we were like, oh, wow, we're cutting edge, aren't we? Because we already knew how to use Zoom. But no, we scrambled. And it's all distant fading memory now, but we were so desperate to talk to other people and to connect with other people. We had webinars, we called them Affinity Sessions, and we would, you'd get on the Zoom and then you'd break into groups based on grade level. And in the breakout rooms, we gave people topics, or we had them read an article ahead of time, or visit a resource. And then people just were able to talk to each other and vent. And
I know a little something about that. Yes. Well, and I think, while it's natural to sort of group people by region, where I'm in a county region with my state organization, we're grouped by counties. And yet what would be more helpful is if we're grouped by grade level, because you've got those early childhood and you've got those people who are supporting your elementary kids, and you're in the middle school librarians and your high school, having those, we call them special interest groups, your SIGs. So you can, and I'm sure that you have some, independent libraries or private school libraries schools who want to get together. And past week, I was especially reminded of how important our state school library associations are when it comes to supporting one another. As president, you are able to establish some priorities when it comes to issues that you would like to see Maine school libraries address better. What is something that you find that is sort of top the list of things you need to work through with your professionals in your state organization?
So there's this perception that Maine is a very white state, and that's simply not true. So I'm really focusing on developing our ability to support our BIPOC students, especially, as we call them, our new Mainers. And they need school librarians in their corners. These kids have been through tremendous challenges, and they come to us with these amazing strengths. I have a pair of kids from the same family who speak 7 languages. Right? And there are all these African languages that they speak. I can't even list them because I'd never heard of them before, as well as like French and Dutch and English. And so, one huge challenge for us is finding books for them and helping them to support the development of all those languages. And of course, obviously, a big challenge is overcoming stereotypes and hurtful attitudes. So that's a big goal for me.
Well, and I think that what you've learned being on your civil rights team has probably given you some of those resources that you can, sort of push out
Absolutely.
To the other library professionals who work in the state of Maine.
Absolutely. And many of the librarians in the state are also civil rights team advisors. There's a big overlap on that Venn diagram.
Well, and it stands to reason that we would want to incorporate some of that in using those sort of precious book dollars that we have to build our collections to be more representative of the students that are the changing population of our student body.
Absolutely. And finding those resources is challenging, but there are, book jobbers and suppliers out there that provide those resources. And it just brings home how important our networking and our professional organization is, because you just can't do that work on your own.
To that end, there are so many library professionals working in Maine schools. Can you give us a sense of how your state organization is supporting all the different skills levels that are, your library professionals are coming in and not necessarily having gone to library school? How are you providing support to your library professionals when they are working in these schools? And what do you think Maine is doing well about that?
So I want to give a shout out to a librarian named Deborah Butterworth, who's in Gardner, Maine. And this is a real passion of hers. And so she is developing a mentoring program for MASL. And she's working really hard using Google Forms and using her network to pair up librarians, even retired librarians. I mean, they have time on their hands, right? and
a somewhat flexible schedule. Yes.
And such a wealth of experience and knowledge to share. So pairing up members of the organization with other members and just getting them in touch with each other. And, silver lining, we all use Zoom now, so it's easy to be connected, even if you're not right next door to each other. We also have leaned a lot on the state of Vermont's mentoring program, which is far and above where ours is. It's very, they actually have funding through, I think it's through University of Vermont. They actually do a course where they train people to be mentors, because there's a lot to being a mentor, right? You have to put your own needs aside and really listen and focus on the needs of your mentee, and be judgment free and supportive and all that stuff. There's a great book called Mentoring Matters that we can share in the show notes. Yeah, Vermont's program is really sophisticated and impressive.
Are you coordinating that officially, or is it kind of off the books? So when you said you sort of lean on Vermont, is this an invitation for you to participate in the training that they offer? Or is it just a sort of informal sharing of resources?
It's just an informal, like, we're trying to develop something similar in Maine, and so we're getting ideas from them. And they have been very generous in sharing what they have been doing and their research, because they're keeping track of the effects and so on.
I love that you mentioned retirees, because I will give a shout out to my own state organization in Michigan, because we have a very, very active retiree organization in our professional groups. We have retirees who will regularly come in and support libraries which are undergoing a transformation, or if they need some help packing up and doing things that just require all hands on deck. And when the all hands on deck come in, sometimes it's the retirees who come in who are providing that additional support, but they also are absolutely vital in keeping our state conference going, because they are less involved with the presentations and the attending all the sessions, but they can be part of that backbone of providing the sort of network of that organizational sort of boots on the ground.
Wow, you're giving me lots of ideas.
Well, we call it MAME Forever. We are actually changing our name, but currently the retirees are called MAME Forever. They have they actually have a scholarship that they offer to, and they provide a lot of the items that are in our silent auction. Because as retirees, they have picked up hobbies and generated some lovely things that can be done in our auction, and that money is used towards scholarship. But they pay a nominal fee to belong to the retired organization of Michigan School Librarians. And
that's amazing. That's definitely giving me some ideas.
Maine is not immune from all of the sort of hypervigilance over the books that are on the shelves that we have. And obviously your collections are as transparent as everybody else's. I imagine that your library professionals are feeling some of that scrutiny as well when it comes to the books you have. Have you felt Maine is addressing the book banning issues as they arise? How has that been working out for you?
So MASL has been very essential to our colleagues in that situation, because we have been able to step up and write letters of support to librarians, and letters of support for specific books that we've addressed to school boards. We've been able to get the word out through our social media about school board meetings so that residents can attend and speak out in support of the libraries. And in general, people are so isolated, and going through these challenges is so traumatic that we've just been a shoulder to lean on. We've been someone they can reach out to. I mean, our intellectual freedom chair, Karen Silverman, has just been fielding email after email and Facebook message after Facebook message. And I've been on the phone with these librarians, and it hasn't all been email. we've just really had to step up and be there for them. One of the challenges that we face in Maine, because it is so rural, is a lot of our schools are wide grade levels, like wide ranges of grade levels. So we'll have a K-8 school or a 6-12 school, and it's a small school, but you're having in your library, you've got kindergartners, but you've got 8th graders, and the books that are available for the 8th graders and need to be available for the 8th graders are scary to those kindergarten parents.
I've worked in a space where we supported 4-year-olds and 11-year-olds and everybody in between. And the idea that every book in that space should be appropriate for every student is inconceivable. It's just not going to happen. When I explained it to my students, I'm like, we're like a grocery store. There's a lot of stuff in here you don't want to buy, but somebody else does. And it's a grocery store. We're a library. We are going to offer books to all sorts of kids, but not everybody, because and kids understand that. I don't understand why adults don't understand that. But I love hearing about how your state has provided that immediate source of support, because I think that state organizations are absolutely vital when it comes to the attacks that have been on the individual school libraries, the individual school library professionals, because they're the ones who are going to have the easiest access to the resources that you can bring to bear, but also that local network of support and who to reach out to, I think, is going to be far better supported by the state organizations, because you have already in place the networking that is required to give that library professional in their collection the support that they so vitally need.
I should point out that it hasn't just been MASL that's stepped up and provided support. Our state public library association has also written letters, and we have that connection already because we work with them so closely. So when a librarian reaches out to us, we say, hey, you'll get a letter from us, but we're going to let MLA know as well, and they'll send a letter as well.
Well, I'm curious, to that extent, you obviously collaborate when it comes to issues of book censorship. Do you find yourself relying on the Maine Library Association in any other ways, because you are representing such a large rural area?
We definitely stay in close contact and try and attend each other's meetings whenever possible. And we have a technology educators group that's very active and strong in Maine. And we have a member of our board is on their board, and they do a conference in the fall. I mean, I think the big thing when we're working with these other organizations is recognizing that we can't, especially with our tiny budget, we can't provide all the professional development. So we work together and share with them. And we try to have a presence at their conferences. The technology organization it's called Actim. They kept having conferences even through the pandemic, and they were virtual. And then they always have some sort of social component in the evenings. And so we had one just for a meeting just for the school librarians who were attending, and we did like a trivia game with them.
Well, and I love that you're sort of state organizations recognizing that there's so much overlap in the membership that you have, and you're ultimately the goals are very much the same, because your target audience are the students that you're supporting, and to bring those resources together in such a way that benefits the students who truly are the ones who we're all working here to support, and the teachers who are trying to do. I know that our ISTE affiliate here in Michigan and our libraries, our librarians and library professionals are all oftentimes overlapping in the leadership of those organizations. So, I'm learning all about the North Star YA Award, which is a joint project with the Maine School Librarians, the Public Librarians, and Maine's Literacy Council. And this seems like a really fun thing that I'd love for you to share with listeners.
Right. So it's a student choice award. And the books are chosen by a committee of librarians and educators. So like there was an English teacher in my school who was on the committee for a while. And they get books sent to them by publishers. These are all books that have been out for at least a year by the time they're voted on. So they're a little bit more obtainable. You know, many of them are already out in paperback, so you can get multiple copies and not break your budget. And the kids have to read at least 3 from the list. The list is pretty extensive. I think it's like 30 books or so. And maybe not that many. Anyway, it's a pretty long list, but you only have to read 3 books from the list, and then you are eligible to vote for your favorite one. And the voting is held in April, and it happens in public libraries as well as school libraries. So that's another instance where we're working with our public library counterparts pretty closely. And there's the YA level, which is actually pretty recent and new. There's also the Maine Student Book Award, the MSBA, which is grades 4 through 8, and the Chickadee, which is picture books. And the winners are recognized at a conference called Reading Roundup that happens every April in Augusta, and we try to get the authors there if we can. And it's, we definitely highlight Maine authors when we can in those lists of nominations, but they're books from all over the country. And this year, Reading Roundup is going to feature Jason Reynolds.
Oh, that's fantastic. I know that that's going to generate a lot of excitement for students and librarians and library professionals.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So one thing we did, which was sort of passive professional development, which my colleague Beth Anderson, who's my vice president, came up with. We had a Padlet for each of the 3 awards that we opened up to our membership. And so there was one for Chickadee, one for MSBA, one for North Star, and members just posted book titles and activities that they did to highlight those books, and activities that they did to highlight the voting and the awards themselves. And those Padlets are still up and available. They're, the ones that are specific to book titles are not as useful, but the ideas about how to highlight the award and the voting are still useful to our members.
Well, and I love that collaborating on resources, that sort of hive mind that comes together and tackles a problem and then has the good sense to share it out with everybody who might benefit from that resource. And that's one of the great things that our state organizations can do. Before I let you go, one last, shout out. I'd love to hear what kinds of things that you're excited about in coming up. And, we're looking at a new year and you're still president of your organization. What kinds of things are you excited and you're looking forward to doing in 2023?
So we are coming up against Jason Reynolds at that conference. So we're thinking that we are going to pair up with that conference rather than have a conference of our own. So we're going to be presenting at that conference ourselves. And one thing I'm super excited about every year is our state awards through MASL to the librarian and the administrator and the paraprofessional of the year. And so we'll share those and present those at that Reading Roundup conference. And I'm hopeful. I'm working with a group called the Maine Humanities Council, which is a great organization. They fund a lot of book groups around the state and do some really innovative professional development and sort of readers advisory events, not just with school libraries at all, but with public libraries and any sort of humanities arts organizations in the state. And I've been talking to them about maybe having a summer book group for school librarians. And they would help us provide the librarians with copies of a book. And then we would get to read and discuss. And of course, we don't have to discuss in person. We can use Zoom. One idea that I'm really excited about, I'm not sure when we'll get to put it into action, is a conference that's kind of like a progressive dinner party where we will get school buses or maybe not. Maybe we'll rely on people driving themselves and carpooling. But the conference would take place in a cluster of schools in one area of the state, and we would drive from school to school. And again, you get to, anytime you walk into a colleague's library, you get so many ideas. And we would have the presentations, the sessions happen at the different locations. We were thinking about maybe coming up with a carpool karaoke contest for the people who are driving from location to location. One of the locations would certainly feature food. So that's an idea that's percolating for professional development.
Well, and I love the idea because you're pulling on the strengths that you have, which are it's the proof of your efforts. When you house and when you're able to bring professionals into your space to showcase all the amazing things that you do, that in and of itself, that is such a learning opportunity. And then to move systematically from space to space, it's a wonderful concept. And especially, would you be doing this in the summertime, like when school's not in session? Or I guess I'm wondering about, like, could you do this on a weekend, or would you be able to do this? It would be
a weekend for sure.
Yeah,
it would have to be a weekday or a weekend. It would definitely have to be a weekend, and maybe it would be summer, and we're still working out the details of that.
But I think that's the solutions that you're coming up with pull on what you have rather than lamenting on what you don't have. I think that's amazing, especially when you're teaming up with other organizations that are doing other wonderful things. This is a great way to sort of bring together the cumulative effects of all of your efforts.
Absolutely. Well, you have to, or you'd go crazy, right?
Heather Perkinson, you are amazing. I'm so grateful. I know that you have given a lot of librarians, whether you are in a rural community here in the United States, or say if you happen to be in Australia, where I know that we're also grappling with trying to support library professionals in rural areas. Would you give us a way to reach out to you? I know you're very generous with your all of the ideas that you are ready to share. Would you give us an idea of how we can reach out to you?
Sure. I think you can find me on Twitter at HK Perkinson. I'm on Instagram at Greeley Library, Greely. And you can find my library website and email me there. And I'd love to hear from people. So much to learn from my colleagues.
Heather, I wish you a wonderful 2023, and thank you so much for joining the conversation today.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.
Friends, you are not going to want to miss the fantastic show notes, which Heather has so generously compiled for us today. Make sure to take a look because you're going to see links to everything that we mentioned in the conversation. While on the topic of supporting rural librarians, I did want to give a shameless plug for the podcast. First of all, there are districts which have used the podcast for summer professional development. As you know, podcasts are always free, customizable, and convenient. Ask your district coordinator of professional development if you and your team can earn hours by tuning in, and you just might be pleasantly surprised. Secondly, I also welcome the opportunity to present webinars to regional educational service agencies, otherwise known as RESAs. This year, I was invited to connect with school librarians in New York, Illinois, and Iowa. If you found this episode helpful, please share it out with your team, your PLN, and on social media. Be sure to follow on your favorite podcatcher so you'll never miss an episode. And if you really like listening today, consider leaving a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Reviews help others find us. One last friendly reminder, I encourage you friends to take advantage of Capstone's generous $20 discount off an order of $100 or more using the code UNITED. I wish you and your loved ones a very wonderful holiday season and a happy new year. Be sure to tune in January 6th, 2023. The topic of our episode will be Genrifying the Elementary Collection and my conversation with Shelley Kappeler. I hope you will tune in.